Tonight, we're going to drift into a world where snow falls like whispered lullabies and forests hum with the gentlest magic, a place where kindness lives in the hearts of woodsmen and beauty sleeps peacefully in cottage beds. This isn't your typical fairy tale. This is a story designed to carry you softly into dreams, where every word is chosen not to excite, but to soothe, where every scene unfolds like a warm blanket being pulled slowly over tired shoulders. Before you settle in completely, take a moment to find your most comfortable position. Let your breathing slow naturally. Tonight's story will meander through peaceful forests and cozy cottages, with characters whose voices are as gentle as morning mist. We'll walk alongside a kind hunter, whose heart is filled with compassion, and visit a young woman whose days are spent in simple, quiet contentment. This story belongs to everyone listening. Whether you're 8 or 80, whether you're tucked into a small bed or stretched across a couch, this tale will meet you exactly where you are. The magic we'll discover tonight isn't the kind that startles or surprises. It's the magic found in dewdrops on spider webs, in the soft crackle of a dying fire, in the way moonlight filters through curtains. Our story begins in a kingdom where time moved differently than it does in our busy world. Here, seasons change slowly, like pages turning in a well-loved book. The people of this land understood that the most beautiful things happened quietly, without fanfare or rush. They knew that a gentle word could heal more than any medicine, and that true strength came from protecting what was fragile and good. In the heart of this peaceful kingdom stood a forest that seemed to breathe with ancient wisdom. The trees grew tall and straight, their branches intertwining like fingers clasped in friendship. Moss carpeted the forest floor in shades of emerald and sage, soft enough that footsteps made no sound at all. Streams wandered through the woods like silver ribbons, their water so clear you could count the smooth stones on the bottom. This forest was home to a hunter named Willem, though he was unlike any hunter you might imagine from other stories. Willem was tall and broad-shouldered, with hands that were strong but gentle, calloused from years of work, but tender when he touched the wounded animals he often found in his travels. His beard was the color of autumn leaves, streaked with silver, that caught the light when he smiled. And he smiled often, for Willem had discovered something that many people spend their whole lives searching for. He had found contentment in simplicity. Willem's cottage sat in a clearing where wildflowers grew in cheerful abundance. Daisies and buttercups nodded in the breeze, while lavender filled the air with its sleepy fragrance. His home was built from logs he had cut himself. Each one fitted perfectly against the next. The roof was covered in moss and tiny wildflowers that seemed to have planted themselves there, as if nature itself wanted to bless his dwelling. Inside, the cottage was warm and welcoming. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth blackened from years of crackling fires. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled not with weapons or hunting trophies, but with books about healing herbs, jars of preserved vegetables from his garden, and small carved animals he whittled during long winter evenings. A simple wooden table sat by the window, where Willem would eat his meals while watching the forest animals come and go. But perhaps the most telling thing about Willem was what he carried instead of traditional hunting gear. Where other hunters might have a quiver full of arrows, Willem carried a leather satchel filled with bandages and healing salves. Where others might have traps and snares, he had blankets for warming creatures, caught in sudden storms. His bow remained at home, gathering dust, while his hands stayed busy mending broken wings and nursing sick forest creatures back to health. Every morning, Willem would wake before dawn and step outside to greet the forest. He moved through the trees like someone walking through his own home, familiar with every path and clearing. The animals had long since learned that this human meant them no harm. Deer would raise their heads when he passed, but didn't flee. Rabbits continued their foraging while he walked by. Even the shy foxes had grown accustomed to his presence, sometimes following him at a distance, curious about his gentle nature. On this particular morning, as autumn painted the leaves in shades of gold and crimson, Willem discovered something unusual. Deep in the forest, where the trees grew so thick that sunlight barely touched the ground, he found a small cottage he had never seen before. It was smaller than his own home, built low to the ground as if it were trying to hide among the ferns and moss. The cottage looked as if it had grown there naturally, its walls covered in ivy and its roof thick with grass and tiny flowers. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, carrying the scent of baking bread and something else, something that reminded Willem of his grandmother's kitchen on winter afternoons. The windows glowed with warm, golden light that seemed to dance and flicker like candleflies. Willem approached slowly, not wanting to startle whoever lived in this hidden place. As he drew closer, he could hear something that made his kind heart swell with recognition. Someone was singing, their voice soft and melodious, weaving through the morning air like a gentle stream. The song had no words that he could understand, but it spoke of contentment and peace, of finding joy in simple daily tasks. Through the window, Willem caught a glimpse of the singer. A young woman moved gracefully around the small cottage, her dark hair falling in gentle waves over her shoulders. She wore a simple dress the color of fresh cream, with sleeves that had been rolled up for work. Her movements were unhurried and purposeful as she tended to what appeared to be fresh loaves of bread cooling on a wooden counter. What struck Willem most was not her beauty, though she was indeed lovely, but the sense of peace that seemed to surround her like a protective bubble. She moved through her small space with the contentment of someone who had found exactly where she belonged. There was no hurry in her gestures, no anxiety in her expression. She was simply present in each moment, finding satisfaction in the simple act of caring for her home. The young woman, whose name was Snow White, though Willem did not yet know this, had come to live in the forest cottage several months ago. She had left behind a life of complications and expectations, seeking something simpler and more authentic. In this hidden place, surrounded by the gentle wisdom of trees and the honest friendship of woodland creatures, she had discovered a peace she never knew was possible. Her days followed a rhythm as natural and comforting as the seasons themselves. She would rise with the sun, lighting her fire and preparing simple meals from the vegetables she grew in her small garden, in the fruits and nuts the forest generously provided. Her mornings were spent tending to her plants, mending clothes, or preparing herbs that she dried for cooking and healing. But Snow White's greatest joy came from the friendships she had formed with the forest creatures. 7 small rabbits had adopted her cottage as their home, each one with its own distinct personality. There was Sleepy, who could often be found napping in patches of sunlight. Grumpy preferred to work alone in the garden, but showed his affection through his diligent care of the vegetables. Happy bounded through the cottage, bringing laughter wherever he went, while Bashful would blush pink around his ears whenever Snow White praised his gentle way with the more timid woodland visitors. Doc, the wisest of the rabbits, seemed to understand healing herbs almost as well as Snow White herself. He would often be found carefully sorting through her collection of dried plants, arranging them with a precision that amazed her. Sneezy had allergies to certain flowers, but refused to let this stop him from helping in the garden, approaching his work with such determination that Snow White couldn't help but admire his courage. And finally, there was Dopey, whose enthusiasm often exceeded his coordination, but whose pure heart and willingness to help made him beloved by all. These 7 companions had transformed Snow White's solitary cottage into a home filled with gentle activity and quiet joy. They worked together without the need for words, understanding each other through small gestures and shared purpose. In the evenings, they would gather around the fire, Snow White reading aloud from books of poetry or old tales, while the rabbits groomed each other and dozed in the warmth. This was the scene that Willem discovered that morning. Though he saw only glimpses through the window, something about the peaceful tableau made him hesitate to announce his presence. He had spent so many years moving through the forest alone, finding his contentment in solitude in the company of wild creatures who expected nothing from him but respect and kindness. But there was something about this hidden cottage and its gentle occupant that stirred a feeling in Willem's heart he had almost forgotten. Not the sharp excitement of attraction, but something softer and deeper. A recognition of a kindred spirit, perhaps. Someone else who had chosen peace over chaos, simplicity over complexity. Willem stood quietly among the trees, watching the peaceful scene unfold through the cottage window. The morning light filtered through the leaves above him, creating patterns of gold and shadow that danced across his weathered face. He felt no urge to hurry forward or announce himself. Instead, he allowed himself this moment of quiet observation, understanding instinctively that some things were too precious to disturb. Without careful thought, the young woman continued her morning routine, unaware of her gentle audience. She moved to a wooden shelf and selected several small clay pots, each one containing different herbs that filled the cottage with the most wonderful fragrances. Willem recognized some of them from his own knowledge of forest plants: chamomile for peaceful sleep, lavender for calm nerves, and something else he couldn't quite identify, but that smelled like summer meadows after rain. As Snow White worked with her herbs, grinding some with a smooth stone mortar and hanging others in small bundles from the cottage's low beams, Willem noticed how the 7 rabbits moved around her with perfect harmony. They seemed to anticipate her needs, bringing her small items or simply staying out of her way when she needed space to work. It was like watching a dance that had been rehearsed for years. Though Willem sensed this was simply the natural rhythm they had found together. One of the rabbits, the one Willem would later learn was called Doc, approached Snow White with a small wrapped bundle in his mouth. She accepted it with a gentle smile, unwrapping what appeared to be a collection of mushrooms, their caps a soft brown color that reminded Willem of autumn leaves. Snow White examined each mushroom carefully, speaking to Doc in soft tones of appreciation and approval. The sight stirred something deep in Willem's memory. His own grandmother had spoken to animals in just such a way, treating them as trusted friends rather than mere creatures. She had taught him that the forest was full of partnerships waiting to be discovered, relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. Watching Snow White with her rabbit companions, Willem felt a warmth spread through his chest, a recognition of someone who understood these same truths. A gentle breeze moved through the forest, carrying with it the scent of the herbs from Snow White's cottage and the earthy richness of moss and fallen leaves. Willem breathed deeply, feeling more at peace than he had in months. There was something about this place, this hidden corner of the forest, that seemed to exist outside of time itself. The usual concerns and small worries that occasionally troubled his mind seemed to fade away like morning mist. Snow White had moved to her fireplace, where she was preparing what appeared to be a simple soup. She worked slowly and mindfully, adding each ingredient with the care of someone who understood that good things couldn't be rushed. Steam rose from her pot, carrying with it the promise of warmth and nourishment. The 7 rabbits had settled themselves around the cottage, some dozing in patches of sunlight that streamed through the windows, others quietly grooming or simply watching their human companion with eyes full of trust and affection. Willem found himself wondering about Snow White's story. What had brought her to this remote cottage? How had she learned to live so harmoniously with the forest creatures? But these questions arose without any urgent need for answers. They were simply gentle curiosities, like wondering about the age of an ancient tree or the destination of a meandering stream. As the morning progressed, Willem noticed other visitors to the cottage. A family of field mice appeared at the doorstep, and Snow White welcomed them with tiny portions of grain scattered on a small wooden plate. A cardinal landed on the windowsill, and she greeted it with soft whistling sounds that seemed to be an actual conversation. Even a young deer approached the cottage garden, and Snow White offered it some of the vegetables she had been harvesting, her movements slow and non-threatening. This was clearly a sanctuary, Willem realized, not just a home, but a place where all creatures were welcome and safe. It reminded him of the stories his grandmother used to tell about the old days, when humans and animals lived in greater harmony, when the boundary between the civilized world and the wild one was softer and more permeable. The sun climbed higher, sending longer streams of golden light through the forest canopy. Willem knew he should continue on his usual morning rounds, checking for injured animals or fallen trees that might block the forest paths. But something kept him rooted to this spot, content to simply witness the gentle rhythm of life around Snow White's cottage. He watched as she stepped outside to tend her small garden. The vegetables grew in neat but natural-looking rows, as if she had worked with the forest floor rather than against it. Carrots, onions, and herbs grew alongside wild plants that she had apparently chosen to keep, creating a garden that looked more like a particularly well-organized patch of woodland than a cultivated plot. Snow White worked with her hands in the earth, and Willem could see the contentment in her posture. She wasn't gardening out of necessity alone, but out of genuine love for the work itself. Each plant received her individual attention, and she seemed to know exactly what each one needed. Some required more water, others needed weeds pulled from around their base, and still others simply needed the gentle touch of her hands to encourage their growth. The 7 rabbits helped in their own ways. Some carried small watering vessels made from hollowed gourds. Others used their keen noses to identify which plants needed attention. And still others simply provided companionship, sitting nearby and offering their presence as Snow White worked. Willem found himself remembering his own garden behind his cottage. It was well maintained and productive, but watching Snow White, he realized there was something different about her approach. Where he gardened efficiently and practically, she seemed to garden with a kind of meditation, finding peace and joy in each small task. It was another lesson in how the same activities could be transformed by the spirit in which they were approached. A butterfly landed on Snow White's shoulder as she worked, its wings the color of sunrise. She paused in her weeding to acknowledge its presence with a soft smile, remaining perfectly still until the delicate creature decided to continue on its journey. Willem watched this interaction with growing admiration. Here was someone who understood that life's most beautiful moments often required nothing more than the ability to be present and aware. The morning was growing warmer, and Willem noticed that Snow White was beginning to prepare for the heat of midday. She moved her herb drying operations to a shadier part of the cottage, repositioned a small chair to catch a cross breeze, and filled several shallow bowls with water for the various animals that might visit seeking relief from the sun. These small acts of consideration and foresight spoke to Willem of a deep wisdom about living in harmony with natural rhythms. Snow White wasn't fighting against the heat of the day or trying to maintain the same activity level, regardless of conditions. Instead, she was adapting gracefully, working with the forest's natural patterns rather than against them. As Willem continued his quiet observation, he began to understand that what he was witnessing wasn't just one person living alone in the woods. It was an entire community, a small ecosystem of mutual care and support centered around Snow White's cottage. She was both caretaker and member of this community, giving and receiving in equal measure. The realization filled Willem with a gentle longing. His own life in the forest was peaceful and fulfilling, but it was largely solitary. He had his friendships with the wild creatures, his work of healing and helping, his comfortable cottage and productive garden. But watching Snow White's life unfold before him, he began to imagine what it might be like to share such a life with someone who understood it as deeply as he did. These thoughts arose without urgency or desperation. They were simply possibilities floating through his mind like clouds drifting across a summer sky. Willem had learned long ago that the best things in life couldn't be forced or hurried. They had to be allowed to develop in their own time, like flowers blooming or seasons changing. The sun reached its peak, and Snow White retreated to the cool interior of her cottage for the midday rest that was common in this peaceful kingdom. Willem took this as his cue to quietly continue his morning journey through the forest. But as he walked away, he found himself already looking forward to tomorrow morning, when he might once again find himself in this part of the forest. As Willem made his way through the dappled sunlight of the forest paths, his mind remained gently occupied with thoughts of the peaceful cottage and its remarkable inhabitant. The familiar sounds of the woodland seemed softer somehow, as if the forest itself had been touched by the same tranquil spirit he had witnessed. His footsteps followed the well-worn trails he had walked countless times before. But today, each step felt lighter, filled with a quiet anticipation he couldn't quite name. The afternoon brought its own gentle rhythm to the forest. Somewhere in the distance, a wood dove called to its mate, the sound echoing softly between the trees. Willem paused to listen, remembering how his grandmother had taught him that different bird calls could tell stories about the day's weather, the health of the forest, and the mood of the creatures who called it home. Today, the birds seemed to be singing of contentment and peace. As he walked, Willem found himself noticing details he might have overlooked before. The way certain flowers turned to follow the sun's path across the sky. How the moss grew thicker on the north side of trees, creating small cushioned seats that seemed designed for rest and contemplation. The patterns that spider webs made when decorated with dewdrops, each one a tiny work of art that would disappear with the first strong breeze. These observations weren't new to Willem, but they felt more vivid today, as if seeing Snow White's gentle attention to the small wonders around her cottage had reminded him to bring that same awareness to his own journey through the forest. It was like looking at a familiar painting and suddenly noticing brushstrokes you had never seen before. His path led him to a small clearing where he often stopped to rest during his longer walks. An ancient oak tree stood at the center, its trunk so wide that Willem would need to stretch his arms twice around to embrace it fully. The tree's branches created a natural canopy overhead, and its roots had grown in such a way that they formed comfortable seats and backrests around the base. Willem settled against the massive trunk, feeling the rough bark through his shirt and breathing in the rich scent of earth and growing things. This was one of his favorite places in the entire forest, a spot where time seemed to move even more slowly than usual. He had discovered it years ago, during his first months in the forest, when he was still learning to find peace in solitude. Rather than seeing it as loneliness as he rested, Willem's thoughts returned naturally to the scene he had witnessed that morning. There had been something almost magical about the harmony between Snow White and her 7 rabbit companions. But it was a gentle, everyday sort of magic, the kind that came from patience and understanding, rather than spells or enchantments. It was the magic of a hand that knew exactly how to comfort a frightened animal, or eyes that could see what a growing plant needed most. Willem had always believed that the most powerful magic was often the quietest kind, the way a mother's lullaby could chase away nightmares. How a well-tended garden could feed not just the body, but the soul. The manner in which a kind word, spoken at just the right moment, could change the entire direction of someone's day. Watching Snow White move through her morning routine, he had seen this gentle magic at work in every gesture. A family of squirrels had taken up residence in the oak tree above him, and Willem could hear their soft chittering as they went about their afternoon activities. Occasionally, a small acorn would drop near his feet, followed by what sounded distinctly like an apologetic chatter from overhead. Willem smiled, remembering how Snow White had seemed to understand the language of her animal friends. Perhaps, he thought, it wasn't so much about understanding their words as it was about understanding their hearts. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves above, creating an ever-shifting pattern of light and shadow on the forest floor. Willem watched these patterns with the same quiet attention he had seen Snow White give to her herb garden. There was something deeply restful about observing the play of light without needing to analyze or change it, simply allowing it to exist as part of the larger symphony of the forest time, passed unmeasured and unworried. Willem had no urgent tasks awaiting him, no appointments to keep or schedules to maintain. This freedom to move through his day according to his own rhythm in the forest's natural patterns was one of the things he treasured most about his chosen life. It allowed for moments like this when he could simply exist in harmony with the world around him without any need to prove or accomplish anything. As the afternoon grew longer, Willem began to think about his evening routine. he would return to his cottage as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, perhaps stopping along the way to gather some of the wild herbs that grew near the stream. He would prepare a simple dinner from vegetables in his garden, light a fire in his hearth, and spend the evening reading or working on one of his small wood-carving projects. But tonight, he realized, his evening would feel different because of the morning's discovery. He would find himself wondering what Snow White was doing as she prepared her own dinner, how the 7 rabbits settled themselves for the night, whether she also enjoyed the peaceful ritual of lighting an evening fire. These thoughts weren't intrusive or overwhelming. They were simply gentle additions to his own quiet contemplations. Like new instruments joining a familiar melody, Willem had learned over his years in the forest that the heart had its own wisdom about timing and connection. He didn't feel any urgency to return immediately to Snow White's cottage or to introduce himself before he was ready. Instead, he trusted that if their paths were meant to cross more directly, the forest would provide the right opportunity in its own time. This patience hadn't always come naturally to him. In his younger days, Willem had been more impulsive, more inclined to act on immediate impulses rather than waiting for the right moment. But the forest had taught him that the most beautiful things often required time to unfold properly. Seeds needed to rest in the earth before they could sprout. Flowers had to bud before they could bloom. Trust had to grow slowly between wild creatures and humans before true friendship could develop. The shadows were beginning to lengthen when Willem finally rose from his resting place beneath the oak tree. His body felt refreshed from the quiet pause, and his mind was clear and peaceful. He gathered his simple belongings and began the leisurely walk back toward his cottage, following paths that wound through groves of birch trees, whose white bark seemed to glow in the afternoon light. As he walked, Willem found himself humming quietly, a wordless melody that seemed to arise naturally from his contented state of mind. The tune was simple and repetitive, the kind of song that could carry someone gently from wakefulness into dreams. He didn't recognize it as any melody he had heard before, but it felt familiar nonetheless, as if it had always existed somewhere in his heart, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The forest around him seemed to respond to his quiet music. Birds in the nearby trees adjusted their own songs to harmonize with his humming. The rustling of leaves in the evening breeze seemed to keep time with his gentle rhythm. Even his footsteps on the soft earth seemed to fall in natural sync with the melody, creating a peaceful symphony of sound that accompanied him home. When Willem's cottage came into view through the trees, he felt the familiar warmth of homecoming wash over him. The small building looked welcoming in the golden afternoon light, its windows reflecting the surrounding forest like friendly eyes. Smoke was already beginning to curl from chimneys throughout the forest as other woodland dwellers prepared for evening. And Willem looked forward to adding his own hearth fire to the gentle signal that another peaceful day was drawing to its close. But as he approached his front door, Willem noticed something that made him pause with curiosity rather than concern. A small basket sat on his doorstep, woven from flexible branches and lined with soft moss. Inside the basket, he could see several items that hadn't been there when he left that morning. There were fresh herbs he didn't recognize, still damp with dew as if they had been gathered recently. A small loaf of bread, its crust golden brown and still slightly warm to the touch. And tucked beneath these gifts, a simple note written in delicate handwriting on paper made from pressed flowers. Willem lifted the note with careful fingers, reading the words that had been written in what appeared to be berry ink. The message was brief, but filled with kindness that made his heart feel suddenly lighter. It read simply, "For the gentle soul who watches over our forest friends, with gratitude for your healing hands and caring heart. May these small gifts bring you the same comfort you bring to others." There was no signature, no identification of who had left these thoughtful presents. But somehow, Willem knew, without needing confirmation, that they had come from the peaceful cottage he had discovered that morning. Snow White had somehow learned of his presence in the forest, of his work healing injured animals and caring for the woodland creatures who needed help. The realization filled Willem with a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Someone had noticed his quiet work and chosen to acknowledge it with gifts given freely and without expectation of recognition or return. It was the kind of gesture that spoke of a heart that understood the value of kindness for its own sake, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. Willem carefully lifted the basket and carried it inside his cottage. The bread filled his small home with the most wonderful aroma, rich and yeasty, with undertones of honey and herbs. The mysterious plants in the basket were unlike anything in his own collection, their leaves a silvery green color, and their scent reminiscent of mountain air and morning mist. He would study them more carefully later, but for now, he simply appreciated them as gifts given in friendship. As evening settled over the forest, Willem prepared his dinner with ingredients both familiar and new. He broke off a piece of the gifted bread to accompany his simple soup, and the taste was everything the aroma had promised. Complex flavors bloomed on his tongue. Speaking of grain ground with care, water drawn from clear springs, and hands that understood the alchemy of turning simple ingredients into nourishment that fed both body and spirit. With his meal finished and his cottage tidied for the night, Willem lit his evening fire and settled into his favorite chair with one of his wood-carving projects. Tonight, he was working on a small figure of a rabbit, its form emerging slowly from a piece of birch wood under the careful guidance of his knife. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the 7 rabbits he had seen that morning, each one with its own distinct personality and role in Snow White's household. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, sending dancing shadows across the walls of the cottage. Outside, the forest was settling into its nighttime rhythm, with the calls of evening birds replacing the songs of their daytime cousins. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate, the sound both haunting and comforting in the way that familiar night sounds can be. Willem's hands moved steadily over the small wooden rabbit, shaping its ears and defining the gentle curve of its back. Wood carving had always been a meditation for him, a way of quieting his mind while keeping his hands busy with purposeful work. Tonight, the activity felt especially peaceful, as if the contentment he had witnessed that morning had somehow transferred itself to his own evening routine. As the fire burned lower and the wooden rabbit took on more detailed features, Willem found his thoughts drifting toward tomorrow. He would wake with the dawn, as always, tend to his own garden and cottage maintenance, and then perhaps find himself drawn once again to that distant part of the forest where Snow White's cottage nestled among the trees. He didn't plan to intrude or to force an introduction that might disturb the peaceful harmony he had witnessed. Instead, he would simply allow his morning walk to carry him in that direction, trusting that whatever was meant to unfold would do so naturally, and in its own time. The forest had its own wisdom about such things, and Willem had learned to trust that wisdom above his own impatience or curiosity. The wooden rabbit was nearly complete now, its form smooth and lifelike under his careful attention. Willem held it up to the firelight, examining the small figure with satisfaction. Tomorrow, he decided, he would leave it somewhere in the forest where it might bring a moment of joy to whoever discovered it. Perhaps near the stream where forest creatures came to drink, or in a clearing where children from the nearby village sometimes played. This had become one of Willem's quiet traditions over the years, leaving small carved animals in places where they might surprise and delight their eventual finders. He never stayed to witness these discoveries, preferring to let the gifts remain anonymous and mysterious. It was another form of the gentle magic he believed in, the kind that worked through small acts of unexpected kindness. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and Willem felt the pleasant tiredness that comes from a day spent in peaceful activity and quiet contemplation. He carefully set aside his carving tools and the finished rabbit, banked the coals in his fireplace for the night, and prepared for bed with the unhurried movements of someone whose days followed natural rhythms rather than artificial schedules. As he settled beneath his simple quilt, Willem's last conscious thoughts were of gratitude for the day's gentle surprises and discoveries, the memory of Snow White's peaceful cottage, the unexpected gifts on his doorstep, the successful completion of his small wood-carving project, all wove themselves together into a tapestry of contentment that would carry him softly into dreams. Outside his window, the forest continued its quiet, nighttime activities, with small creatures going about their nocturnal business, and the larger rhythms of wind and weather continuing their ancient patterns. Willem's breathing gradually slowed and deepened as he joined this peaceful symphony of rest, his dreams already beginning to form around images of sunlit cottages, gentle hands tending garden plants, and the quiet magic that exists in the space between one heartbeat and the next, beat and the next. The first light of dawn filtered through Willem's cottage window like liquid gold, gentle and unhurried in the way that forest mornings always were. He woke naturally, without the jarring intrusion of bells or alarms, his body's internal rhythm perfectly synchronized with the forest's own awakening. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of dew-dampened earth and the faint perfume of night-blooming flowers that were just beginning to close their petals as day approached. Willem rose slowly, allowing himself the luxury of a gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness. He moved through his morning routine with the same unhurried grace he brought to all his activities, washing his face in cool water from the pitcher by his window, and dressing in clothes that were simple but well made, designed for comfort rather than fashion. The wooden rabbit he had carved the night before sat on his table, its surface smooth and warm to the touch, ready for whatever purpose the day might reveal. Outside, the forest was conducting its own gentle morning symphony. Birds called to each other across the spaces between trees, their songs weaving together into melodies that seemed designed more for beauty than communication. Somewhere nearby, a brook whispered over smooth stones, its voice adding a liquid undertone to the woodland chorus. The sound of leaves rustling in the morning breeze completed the composition, creating a natural music that no human orchestra could hope to duplicate. As Willem prepared his simple breakfast of bread and honey, he found his thoughts turning once again toward the distant cottage he had discovered. The memory of Snow White's peaceful morning routine played in his mind like a gentle melody, and he wondered what she might be doing at this very moment. Perhaps she too was greeting the dawn with quiet contentment, moving through her own morning rituals with the same mindful attention he had witnessed the day before. The bread he ate was still the remarkable loaf that had appeared on his doorstep, its complex flavors seeming even more pronounced in the clear morning air. Each bite carried hints of grain fields ripening under summer sun, of mills where wheat was ground by patient hands, of ovens where love was baked into every loaf alongside the more tangible ingredients. It was the kind of bread that told stories, with every taste, stories of care and craftsmanship, passed down through generations of bakers who understood their work as both art and service. After his meal, Willem gathered his usual supplies for the day's forest wanderings. His leather satchel contained the healing salves and clean bandages that had become his trademark among the woodland creatures, a small flask of clean water, some dried fruits and nuts for energy, and the carved rabbit that would find its new home somewhere in the forest before the day was through. He moved with the deliberate care of someone who had learned that preparation was itself a form of meditation, each item placed in its proper location with conscious intention. The morning air outside his cottage was soft and welcoming, neither too warm nor too cool, but perfectly balanced in the way that early autumn mornings could be. Willem breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the rich oxygen that the forest trees provided so generously. He had read once that trees and humans existed in a kind of natural partnership, each providing what the other needed most. Trees gave oxygen and beauty and shelter, while humans could offer protection and appreciation and careful tending. It seemed to him a perfect example of how different forms of life could support each other without competition or conflict. His feet found the familiar forest paths with the unconscious ease of long practice. Willem had walked these routes so many times that his body seemed to know the way independent of his conscious mind, leaving his thoughts free to wander where they would. This morning, they wandered consistently in the direction of a certain hidden cottage, though he made no deliberate effort to guide them there. It was simply where his heart wanted to rest, like water finding its natural level. The forest around him was alive with the gentle activity of creatures going about their morning business. A family of chipmunks scurried among the fallen leaves, their cheeks bulging with nuts they were storing for winter. A red squirrel chattered at Willem from the safety of a high branch, not in alarm, but in what seemed like friendly greeting. Even a shy doe stepped delicately across his path at a respectful distance, pausing to regard him with large, liquid eyes before continuing on her way to whatever destination called to her. These encounters filled Willem with the quiet joy that had drawn him to forest life in the first place. Here, among creatures who lived according to natural rhythms and seasonal wisdom, he had found a pace of life that suited his temperament perfectly. There was no rushing toward artificial deadlines, no pressure to accomplish more than what each day naturally contained. Instead, there was time for observation, for appreciation, for the kind of deep noticing that revealed new wonders even in familiar places. As his walk continued, Willem found himself approaching the area where Snow White's cottage lay hidden among the trees. He made no conscious decision to seek it out, but simply allowed his feet to carry him along paths that seemed to beckon with particular invitation this morning. The forest here felt different somehow, more peaceful and welcoming than usual, as if the very trees had been touched by the same gentle spirit he had witnessed the day before. Through the green canopy above, sunlight filtered down in golden columns that seemed to dance and shift with every breath of wind. The air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers and clean earth, and somewhere nearby, Willem could hear the soft murmur of a stream that he hadn't noticed during his previous visit. Everything about this part of the forest spoke of harmony and balance, of a place where the natural world had been allowed to flourish according to its own perfect design. When the cottage came into view through the trees, Willem felt the same sense of peaceful discovery he had experienced the morning before. The small building seemed even more perfectly integrated into its surroundings in the early light, its walls and roof so covered with growing things that it appeared to be a natural formation rather than a human dwelling. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, and the windows glowed with the warm light of candles or a well-tended fire. Willem positioned himself in the same sheltered spot among the trees where he had watched the day before, settling against the trunk of a large maple whose leaves were just beginning to show hints of autumn color. From here, he had a clear view of the cottage and its small garden, while remaining invisible to anyone who might be moving about inside the peaceful dwelling. The cottage door opened, as if responding to some internal signal, and Snow White stepped outside into the morning air. She wore a different dress today, this one the soft blue-gray color of morning mist, with sleeves that caught and held the early light like captured moonbeams. Her dark hair was braided simply and hung over one shoulder, and her movements carried the same unhurried grace that had captivated Willem during his first observation. But this morning, Snow White was not alone. The 7 rabbits emerged from the cottage behind her, each one stretching and yawning in the endearing way that small creatures do when transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. Willem watched with growing delight as each rabbit seemed to have its own morning routine, just as distinct and individual as any human might possess. And so our gentle tale draws to its peaceful close, like the last notes of a lullaby fading into silence. Willem and Snow White continue their quiet lives in the forest, surrounded by friendship and simple contentment, their days flowing like streams that know exactly where they belong. The 7 rabbits tend their garden, the woodland creatures visit as they always have, and the cottage remains a sanctuary where kindness grows as naturally as wildflowers. Sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones where nothing dramatic happens, where peace is the greatest adventure and contentment the most precious treasure. Let these gentle images carry you now into your own dreams, where forests whisper lullabies and every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of perfect rest.